Have you ever felt that the deeper you think, the more isolated you become, that the more you understand, the less people want to listen? It's not just in your head. Society has always feared deep thinkers, not because they are wrong, but because they see what others refuse to. History proves it, from Socrates to N, from Galileo to Tesla. Brilliant minds have been ridiculed, silenced, or ignored, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they made people uncomfortable. Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers, believed intelligence itself was a curse, one that isolates those who see the world too clearly. But why? Why does society resist those who think differently? The answer lies deep within human psychology. Think about this. When you stand next to someone who is physically strong, you don't necessarily feel weak. You might even admire their strength when you meet someone wealthy. You may envy them, but you don't feel personally attacked. But when you encounter someone who is intellectually superior, something different happens. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just introduce new ideas, they reflect back the limitations of those around them, and people don't forgive that easily. The mere presence of someone who thinks deeply can make others feel inadequate, even if the deep thinker says nothing at all. But why? Why does intelligence, more than any other kind of superiority, provoke such discomfort to understand this? Consider how our minds process different forms of superiority. When someone is physically strong, we see them as a leader, a protector. When someone is wealthy, we may admire their success or aspire to something similar. These qualities, strength, wealth, beauty, are external. We recognize them, but they don't necessarily challenge our core self. Perception intelligence, however, operates differently, unlike physical strength or material wealth. Intelligence is deeply tied to identity. We define ourselves by our thoughts, our beliefs, our understanding of the world. When we meet someone who thinks on a deeper level, someone who questions what we take for granted, it can feel like a direct attack on our sense of self. Instead of admiring intelligence, many subconsciously resist it. Not because the deep thinker is arrogant or dismissive, but because their very existence forces others to confront their own limitations. This is why, throughout history, deep thinkers have been pushed to the fringes of society. Their insights don't just challenge ideas. They challenge egos, and human beings, by nature, will do almost anything to protect their ego from discomfort. Take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. Have you ever tried to introduce a deep or complex idea into a casual conversation only to be met with blank stares or awkward silence? Have you ever noticed how quickly people change the subject when a conversation moves? Beyond surface-level chatter, this isn't just coincidence, it's a defense mechanism. When people encounter a deep thinker, their minds go into self-preservation mode. Instead of being curious, they resist. Instead of engaging, they dismiss. This is why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries often find themselves isolated, not because they seek solitude, but because society pushes them away. Interestingly, studies show that in social settings, confidence is often valued more than intelligence. People are naturally drawn to those who project certainty, even if their ideas are shallow. This is why charismatic yet simplistic thinkers gain more influence than deep thinkers who speak with nuance. History is full of examples: populist leaders, motivational speakers, and viral influencers who thrive by telling people what they want to hear rather than challenging them to think critically. Meanwhile, those who question widely accepted beliefs often struggle to find a broad audience. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more one seeks truth, the more disconnected they become from the majority. But the mirror effect doesn't just expose society's limitations, it reveals why society resists change in the first place. So the question remains, if intelligence is so threatening, is there scientific proof that people actually fear it? Modern neuroscience says yes. Studies show that when people feel intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the region responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. In simple terms, deep thinking isn't just intimidating, it triggers a primal survival response similar to what we feel when facing danger. But why? Why does intelligence activate the same fierce circuits as a physical threat? The answer lies in how the human brain evolved for most of history. Survival didn't depend on being the smartest person in the room. It depended on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors thrived in tribes where social harmony meant safety. To be rejected by the group was to be vulnerable, to face isolation, which often led to death. This is why human brains are wired for social acceptance over intellectual pursuit. When a highly intelligent person enters a social setting, they unknowingly disrupt the tribal balance. Their presence challenges existing ideas, social norms, and group dynamics. The brain perceives this as a threat, triggering its defense mechanisms not against an enemy, but against a deeper thinker. This is why many deep thinkers feel isolated, not because they lack social skills, but because their intelligence makes them stand out in a world that values fitting in over standing out. A 2021 study from Stanford University uncovered something even more revealing. The rejection of deep thinkers is context-dependent, one-on-one. People feel less threatened by intellectuals, but in group settings, the threat response spikes dramatically. Why? Because in groups, social status becomes more important. People don't just react to intelligence itself, they react to how others perceive them in comparison. When someone feels outshined by a deep thinker, their instinct is often to undermine or exclude them, an unconscious attempt to protect their social standing. This explains why deep thinkers may find genuine conversations in private settings, but struggle to engage in larger social environments. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that explain why intelligence is so often met with resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Those with low ability tend to overestimate their intelligence, while highly intelligent individuals often doubt themselves. This creates friction. Those who know little believe they know more than they do, leading them to dismiss deeper thinkers. Status quo bias. The human brain favors familiar ideas over complex, disruptive truths. Intelligence challenges the status quo, making people uncomfortable. The backfire effect. When confronted with information that contradicts their beliefs, people don't change their minds. They double down deep. Thinkers often face this reaction when introducing challenging ideas in the digital age. Social media has amplified this rejection of intelligence. Algorithms prioritize engagement over depth, allowing emotionally charged, controversial content to spread far faster than well-reasoned arguments. Look at the most viral content. Simple, catchy, and often misleading soundbites outperform nuanced discussions. The more intellectual someone is, the harder it becomes to condense deep ideas into bite-sized, viral, friendly content. As a result, society increasingly favors entertainment over enlightenment, making it even more difficult for deep thinkers to gain widespread acceptance. So, what does this mean for deep thinkers? The rejection of intelligence isn't just social, it's biological, psychological, and cultural. It is embedded in human nature, reinforced by group dynamics and magnified by modern technology. This doesn't mean deep thinkers should stop sharing their ideas, but it does mean they must understand the forces working against them. But if society resists intelligence, what does it embrace? The answer lies in comfort. A world where predictability is preferred over truth. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most brutally honest philosophers, believed intelligence was not a gift, but a curse, while many thinkers saw intelligence as the key to success. Schopenhauer argued that the smarter a person is, the more they will struggle to connect with society. But why? What makes intelligence such a burden? Schopenhauer's philosophy was built on a concept he called the will, a blind, irrational force, driving all human behavior. According to him, most people live their lives controlled by the will to live, seeking pleasure, comfort, and survival. Above all else, however highly intelligent individuals operate differently instead of blindly following instinct. They develop the will to truth, an insatiable desire to understand reality, even when it leads to discomfort. Regular people seek pleasure and avoid difficult truths. Deep thinkers, however, seek truth even when it leads to pain and isolation. This creates a fundamental disconnect between intellectuals and the rest of society, where most people find meaning in relationships, entertainment, and routine. Pleasures. Deep thinkers often feel disillusioned, seeing these things as distractions from deeper existential questions. Schopenhauer believed that the more one understands human nature, the harder it becomes to relate to others. Deep thinkers see through deception. Most social interactions revolve around small talk, status games, and polite dishonesty, things they struggle to engage in because they value truth over appearances. They crave depth, but society favors simplicity. Most people prefer surface-level conversations, while deep thinkers long for meaningful discussions. This makes everyday interactions feel dull, even isolating. They recognize the futility of human desires. Schopenhauer saw ambition as an illusion. Most people chase money, power, and relationships without questioning why. But deep thinkers often do, making them seem distant or indifferent to what excites the majority. This is why intelligent people often feel misunderstood, alienated, or even resented. Their mere presence forces others to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves, truths most people would rather ignore. Schopenhauer compared intelligence to a heightened sense of awareness, a blessing that often feels like a curse. He wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial." His reasoning was simple. The more you understand, the less you can ignore, the more aware you are of the world's flaws. The harder it is to find happiness in it. The more you think deeply, the lonelier you become. For Schopenhauer, intelligence and happiness were inversely related. He believed that ignorance, not wisdom, was the true key to happiness. This is why deep thinkers throughout history, Pascal, Kafka, Nietzsche, have struggled with depression, existential crisis, and social isolation. But Schopenhauer didn't just diagnose the problem, he also offered solutions. He believed that while intelligence leads to loneliness, there are ways for deep thinkers to cope with their isolation. Embrace solitude. Schopenhauer saw solitude not as a punishment, but a privilege. Instead of seeking validation from society, deep thinkers should use their alone time for intellectual and creative pursuits. Seek like-minded individuals rather than trying to fit into mainstream society. He advised intellectuals to find those who think like them through books, philosophy, or exclusive intellectual circles. Engage with the world wisely. He warned against blindly sharing deep insights with those unready to hear them. Instead, he suggested observing society, learning its patterns, and choosing words carefully. Schopenhauer's teachings serve as a guide for modern deep thinkers struggling with social rejection, reminding them that while intelligence may be isolating, it is also a path to profound understanding. While intelligence may lead to loneliness, it also grants freedom, wisdom, and a deeper understanding of life. Schopenhauer saw intelligence as a double-edged sword, a source of both power and pain. It allows one to see reality with clarity, yet distances them from those who prefer comforting illusions. In the end, his philosophy confirms what many deep thinkers have long suspected. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence reveals. Deep thinkers aren't rejected because they're wrong. They're rejected because they're right too soon. So if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this: you are not broken, you are simply seeing the world as it truly is. But does this mean deep thinkers are doomed to isolation? Or is there a way to navigate society while preserving intellectual depth? The truth is, society isn't built to embrace deep thinkers. If it's built to maintain stability, most people prioritize comfort over truth. That's why shallow conversations, simple ideas, and repetitive content dominate social spaces. But why is comfort prioritized over intellectual depth? Why does society resist change, even when that change leads to progress? The answer lies in human psychology and the institutions that shape our thinking. From an early age, at its core, the human brain craves certainty and predictability. Evolution has wired us to avoid mental discomfort, a phenomenon psychologists call cognitive ease, the psychological barriers to deep thinking. Cognitive ease. The brain prefers simple, familiar information because it requires less energy to process. When an idea is complex or unfamiliar, the brain perceives it as difficult, even threatening system justification. Theory. People instinctively defend the status quo, even when it works against them, instead of questioning outdated beliefs. They rationalize them because change feels too uncertain. Groupthink. Humans are social creatures. Most would rather conform to widely accepted beliefs than risk rejection by challenging them. This is why intellectual dissent, no matter how truthful, is often met with resistance. This deep psychological preference for comfort over complexity explains why intellectuals, philosophers, and scientists have always struggled to gain mass acceptance, especially in their lifetimes. Just look at today's digital world. Who gets the most attention on social media? Not the intellectuals, but those who can reduce complex ideas into viral feel-good sound bites. Thought-provoking discussions struggle to gain traction because depth takes time. But viral content, it's instant, emotional, and easy to digest. Algorithms prioritize engagement, and nothing engages people more than controversy, outrage, or humor, all of which often sideline rational, intellectual discourse. The digital age. A war on depth. Echo chambers form where people are only exposed to ideas that reinforce their existing beliefs, making them resistant to new perspectives. Critical thinkers who challenge the mainstream narrative are often ignored, misunderstood, or outright attacked. But this rejection of deep thinking doesn't start online. It begins in the very institutions that shape our minds. The education system, where intelligence is conditioned out of US schools, claim to value intelligence, but in reality they reward obedience over independent thought. Students who memorize and regurgitate information succeed, while those who question, challenge, or think beyond the curriculum are labeled as disruptive. Those who challenge authority are often labeled as troublemakers. The workplace. Intelligence isn't always an asset. The corporate world doesn't reward the most intelligent or innovative employees. It rewards those who fit in, those who maintain the existing power structure rather than disrupt it. Politics. The victory of charisma over truth in politics. Leaders who make bold, logical, but unpopular statements often lose to those who simply tell people what they want to hear. This explains why some of history's greatest intellectuals were outcasts during their lifetimes. Their ideas weren't seen as valuable, they were seen as threatening. Society claims to value intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking, but in reality, it only celebrates these qualities after they are safe and widely accepted. Intelligence is only celebrated in hindsight. Consider these examples. Galileo was imprisoned for his discoveries. Yet today we praise him as a scientific genius. Van Gogh died in poverty, yet now his paintings are worth millions. Nikola Tesla revolutionized energy, yet he lived and died in obscurity. Society does not embrace intelligence when it challenges the norm. It only celebrates it after the threat has passed. So what can deep thinkers do? If you've ever felt misunderstood for thinking deeply, you're in good company. Throughout history, some of the most brilliant minds were not celebrated during their lifetimes. They were ridiculed, persecuted, or ignored. Their ideas were seen as dangerous, disruptive, or simply too complex for society to accept. At the time, these thinkers had one thing in common: they were ahead of their time, and because of that, they suffered for their wisdom. Socrates, the philosopher who died for truth, the father of Western philosophy. Socrates spent his life questioning commonly held beliefs. He challenged people to think critically, to examine their own ideas, and to embrace logic over blind tradition. But instead of being celebrated for his wisdom, he was put on trial for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. His real crime encouraging people to think for themselves, given the chance to escape. He refused. Instead, he chose to drink poison rather than abandon his principles. His famous last words, "The unexamined life is not worth living," his death sent a clear message. Society fears those who challenge its core beliefs. Galileo punished for discovering the truth. Galileo's only crime was proving reality when he discovered that the earth revolves around the sun. He shattered centuries of religious dogma, but those in power who controlled knowledge branded him a heretic under threat of torture. He was forced to publicly deny his own discoveries. He spent the rest of his life under house arrest, his work banned for nearly a century. Even the most undeniable truths will be rejected if they threaten the existing power structure. Nietzsche. The philosopher who saw too much Nietzsche's work was considered too radical, too unsettling. He argued that traditional morality was flawed, that society was built on comforting lies, and that true strength came from creating one's own values. At the time, his ideas were too much for people to handle. He was dismissed as insane. His works were ignored, misinterpreted, or twisted beyond recognition. The fate of visionaries rejected in the present, revered in the future. Philosophy doesn't exist in isolation. It shapes psychology, literature, and existentialism. Nietzsche's ideas on power, will, and morality now define modern philosophy, proving that society often rejects deep thinkers in their time, only to embrace them later. Nikola Tesla. The genius society left behind. Tesla was a visionary. He dreamed of free energy for the world, wireless electricity, and technological advancements that could have transformed civilization. But society, more specifically, those in power, saw his ideas as a threat. Industrialists like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan profited from selling electricity. Tesla's vision of energy, it was shut down. Despite his genius, he died alone in a small hotel room, forgotten and broke. While others built fortunes using his stolen ideas, his story is a perfect example of how society often rewards businessmen and marketers over true visionaries. Alan Turing, the tragic hero of computing. Alan Turing's brilliance helped end World War II. His code-breaking saved millions of lives. His theories in computing became the foundation of artificial intelligence, and yet, instead of being honored, he was persecuted for his personal life. In 1952, he was chemically castrated for being gay. 2 years later, he took his own life at just 41 years old. Today, we recognize him as a hero, but in his time, society discarded him despite his extraordinary contributions. Hyper, the forgotten woman of science. While most historical deep-think ears were men, H.P. of Alexandria was a rare exception. A philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer, she challenged the male-dominated intellectual world of ancient Rome. She taught scientific reasoning and rational thought, which put her at odds with religious authorities. In 415 A, a mob of religious extremists saw her as a threat to their power. They brutally murdered her. Her story highlights a crucial pattern in history. Intellectual progress is often met with violent resistance. Society resists what it cannot yet understand. Each of these thinkers shared the same fate. They introduced ideas too advanced for their time. They were rejected, ridiculed, or punished while they were alive, yet their ideas later became the foundation of human progress. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence represents: change, and that raises an important question. If history proves that society resists deep thinkers, what can you do if you are one of them? Are deep thinkers doomed to loneliness? Not at all. It simply means you need to navigate society wisely. Not every place or person is ready for deep conversations. Save your most profound thoughts for those who truly appreciate them. You don't need millions to understand you, just the right ones. Seek out those who think like you. Whether through books online, communities, or intellectual circles, the greatest thinkers in history found ways to make deep ideas accessible. Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it, simply you don't understand it well enough. Learn to communicate your depth without overwhelming others." Schopenhauer put it best, talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target. No one else can see. Deep thinkers see the world differently. That will always make some people uncomfortable, but does not mean you should stop thinking deeply. Society needs deep thinkers. It just doesn't always know how to embrace them. So if you've ever felt like an outsider because of your thoughts, remember this: you are not alone. And while society may fear deep thinkers, it is deep thinkers who push humanity forward. Join the conversation. If this video resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking deeply? Let's start a conversation. And if you want to explore more insights from history's greatest minds, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.